things, that God does things beyond our explanation, that God does things that we can't explain. You know, that's kind of why I like walking up to Arthur's Seat. Because every time that I get to the top, whether it's windy and dark, I try not to do it then because it's really windy and dark up there. Or whether it's sunshiny, I look out and I see God's creation and I recognize that, wow, God is big. He's great. He's powerful. And that's what the start of it was, that God is great. He's holy. He's rich. He's incredible. And then that He's omniscient. Part of the prayer that Jesus taught them to pray, now I'm going to add in the part that's found in Matthew, was, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done. It's a prayer of recognizing that God knows everything that's going on, that God knows the very hairs on your head, that God knows even how many fell out this morning, that God knows what's going to happen to you tomorrow, that God knows what's going to happen to you the next day, that God knows the plans that He has for you, that God is in charge. And when Jesus was teaching them to pray, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done, what He was doing was saying, guys, you've got to come in a place where you're recognizing that the most important thing in your life is that God's kingdom is poured out in and through you, and that His will becomes yours. That His will is what's most important. That as long as you follow His will, you're in the right place. And so there He was encouraging them to pray. Those short and simple prayers that started out with God's holiness and His omniscience. It very quickly moved to asking for forgiveness. Now, folks, most of the time we're at a place where we don't like asking for forgiveness. Most of us like people to think that we're A-okay, don't we? And we put on a good face, and the face says, I'm almost perfect. How about you? When the truth is, it's so far from what we really are. The truth is, we're just people that are needy before God. And we need God's forgiveness. We need God to pluck that heavy weight of sin off of us. And we need God to shower His forgiveness in such a way that we don't walk away in doom and gloom, but we walk away recognizing God passionately loves me. He has forgiven me. We need His forgiveness, and Jesus recognized that. Not only do we need His forgiveness, but we need to forgive others. And He pointed to that in the prayer. That's a basic need in our life. Sin has crept in on us, not just crept, it has fallen in on us like a ton of bricks. And we need God to be able to take that weight off of us. And part of taking that weight off of us is by us taking God's power and say, God, I may not be able to forgive that person right now, but by Your grace, I will. And forgiving those as He has forgiven us. And it begins to take all of these weights off of us, and all of this grace begins to shower on us. And instead of being a person that is striving all the time, we're a person or people that can just rest in His love. Another part that He tells us to do is to just be simply asking Him to provide for us. Now, folks, in the Western world, most of the time we forget that because most of us have a plenty. We have enough. We have more than enough. But some of you don't. Some of you have been caught in struggles and in difficulties, and God just says, come to me. Ask me to provide. Ask me to pour it out. Remember at one time in our lives, we were starting a new church, and the new church was struggling, and so I was working at several different jobs, and in the midst of working those jobs just to keep afloat, one of the businesses went out of business, and they went out of business owing me a great deal of money. And that money was already, there accounted for the bills. You understand those types of times? And so I was at a place where I knew that money wasn't going to come in. And I remember going up many times to my daughter's room to put her to bed, and I'd put her to bed, and I'd just sit down on the floor and begin praying. I'd pray for her, and very quickly she'd go to sleep, and I'd just be sitting there praying. And I just remember calling out to God and saying, God, You know our needs better than I do. You know what my family needs. You know, and you know how to provide it. There's something just incredibly miraculous in that time when I come to the point where I recognize that God knew what I needed better than I did, and that He knew how to provide it. And needless to say, time after time, He provided. And folks, as I look at all of these things, and then I look at the next thing, it says, and lead us not into temptation, but there's a request to God to say, God, keep me on your straight path. God, I need to know that straight path, and I want to walk in it, and I want to be with you, and I want to be led by you and directed by you. And I began to think, this prayer is so simple. It's so real, and it's so true. It gets down to the core of our beings. In fact, it really brings us to places where we just realize Jesus knew exactly what we were feeling and what was going on in our heart. But if we stop there, you know what? I think we make a mistake, because the writer Luke picked up that Jesus was teaching some more things. And I want to read this next passage, and then I want us to leave with this challenge today. It says, then he said to them, suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to him at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, because a friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. Then the one inside answers, don't bother me. The door's already locked, and my children are with me in bed. I can't go up and give you anything. I tell you, though he will not get up and give him the bread because he is his friend, yet because of the man's boldness, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. Now, I stopped there in the passage. The passage goes on and continues to teach similar things. But here's the thing that Jesus told them about prayer. If one of you comes to my house in the middle of the night and knocks on my door, my immediate response will be, go away! That's what my kids tell me anyway when they wake me up. Before I get out of my slumber and out of my stupor, the immediate response is, who is waking me up now? Leave me alone. But if you're knocking on my door and you're knocking and you're knocking and you have a need, and the truth is I'm going to come down and I'm going to open the door. I'm going to find out what your need is. And I'm going to come and I'm going to say, you know what? I'll do everything I can to help you. I'll do everything that I can to help you. Folks, how much greater is God than I am? The truth is, what Jesus was looking at and teaching to his people was saying there needs to be an expectation in your life that God's going to answer prayer. There needs to be an expectation in your life that God's going to do what you're asking. That as the children of God, if you're putting your heart in line with His